You have found Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggle stories and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. We are locally underwritten by the Bank of Sun Prairie, and of course, past episodes of the Authentic Business Adventures program can be found on the podcast link at drawincustomers.com. My name is James Kademan, entrepreneur, author, speaker, and helpful coach to small business owners across the country. Today, we're welcoming / preparing to learn from Rhonda Noordyk, the CEO of the Women's Financial Wellness Center. Rhonda, how are you doing today?
Hey, I am great, James. How are you?
I'm doing very well. I'm excited.
Yes, me too.
I guess I'm in the process of writing this book on financial stuff, and I bet that you know probably way more about that.
Well, it's my focus is really for women that are going through divorce. And so that's really where our niche and specialty lies.
Yeah. Can you first, I guess there's so many things going through my head right now. One, how did you come across this niche or get into this niche?
Yeah. So I started in the financial industry back in 2002 and knew very early on that I wanted to work with women, partly because I've wanted to help them and I was seeing the results of helping them, right? I mean, I started in the industry when I was 28 years old, and I'm like, okay, we could fill a room full of women that wanted to learn about finances, and women decades older than me were listening to what I had to share with them. And I'm like, okay, this is really cool. So clearly there's a need, right, and a desire for them to learn about finances. So fast forward, I spent 12 years in the financial industry and really continued to grow that niche. And I think a lot of times my male colleagues were like, we don't really get what you're doing in there. Like, you've got wine and you're laughing, and are we really doing anything productive? But we were. And so long story short, during that same period of time, I was also teaching in higher education and really had a passion for education and empowering women. So in 2014, I decided to leave the financial industry and open the Women's Financial Wellness Center. So a lot of times people think that we do financial planning. We don't. I build on that knowledge that I have from being in the financial industry. But what we're doing is coaching, so helping with the mindset around money, education, so teaching concepts and strategies. And then the consulting piece is really where we're doing the deep dive analysis of the numbers and things like that. So the business model is very empowering to women so that as they go through the divorce process, they're not only going through the divorce process, but we're using it as an opportunity to teach them some really important things. So when they get on the other side of it, they feel empowered.
Interesting. So the way that I understand your business, is it more or less a one and done kind of thing? Or are people staying with you after they get divorced? Or are you just essentially educating them and then fly free, bird, or something like that?
Well, so what happens is, I always say it depends on where we come in the movie, right? Because if we come in the beginning, we are with women until they get through the divorce process. So if they're contemplating but haven't filed, we'll help them with that. We'll help them interview attorneys. We'll help them put together a budget. We'll help them organize and gather all their documents. So while our emphasis is financial, we're actually also holistically kind of project managing the divorce process as part of our services as well. If we come in the middle, we get a lay of the land of, who the characters are and what the plot is.
That's an excellent analogy. I love that. That's awesome.
And then sometimes we come in, it's like almost the credits are starting to run. Like we come in the 11th hour and we're like, oh my gosh, like we gotta make sure some stuff's buttoned up here before you officially make it final. But no matter where we come in, whether it's in the before, in the middle, or toward the end, we always then do a session after, which we call the divorce wrap-up, like strategy session. And what we do is we take all the things that are in the marital settlement agreement and we map on a timeline so that women know what else they need to be working on, what activities they still need to do, what things need to get wrapped up. And it is at that point then we'll make those introductions to other professionals that they may need, such as estate planning attorneys or financial advisors, things like that.
Okay.
So we do that final wrap up to kind of pass the baton to that next team, that then can take it from there. So our average length of time that we're working with a client is about a year. And
Wow.
then once
Okay.
it's over, we do the wrap up and then we move on to start that process over again. So it's a really, I don't know, it's a really sacred time of when we get to spend time with these women that, we see them in their darkest, deepest, most challenging
Mm-hmm.
situations. And then we get to see them at the end where they're starting to kind of come out of it and they're really starting to, be a little more confident. And then years later, right, we see them somewhere or see them on social media and it's like, oh my gosh, this is awesome. Um,
Interesting.
so I had a client whose divorce wrapped up in July and she's a very like talented artist. And I had her create some gifts for my team. And so I went over to her house here locally to pick them up and she's like, oh, come on in. So I got to see her new condo and she's like, Rhonda, go look. Like, she was making mimosas or whatever for us. And so she's like, go turn on the lights, go check. And I'm like running around her house, turning on all the lights and checking out her place. And it was like, I don't always get to see that side of it, once
Sure.
the stuff is over. And so I left there like pretty emotional, like, this is awesome. She's doing really well. She's redecorated in this new beautiful place. Um, she was hosting brunch the next day, so she had all of, her
Fun.
it was just really, so she had all of her decorations up for that. And it was just nice to see full circle, like they get to the other side and they're gonna be okay. It's just hard, you know?
Right. Yeah. I imagine it's a challenging time. Luckily, I've never had to go through it, but I've had some friends that have, and I don't think anyone enjoys it.
No,
But
no.
I suppose if it was enjoyable, it'd happen even more.
Unfortunately, there's probably some truth to that. And, with COVID, I mean, it's been interesting to watch those. I'm very much like I watch trends of things.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the divorce rate has gone up since COVID 34%. So,
Wow, 34%. It was already high, wasn't it? So it was roughly 50%, I imagine, right?
right.
Somewhere around there.
I
So
mean,
does that put it 34% above 50% is,
it's a
oh, it's not
lot. That's
84%,
all
but
I
I
know.
imagine that's going to be 60 odd percent,
Right.
something like that.
It's a lot. And
Wow.
so all of my attorney colleagues that we work with, they're busy. Normally this time of year things get a little quieter. It hasn't been quiet at all. Normally I can take off between Christmas and New Year's, not happening. Like it's just been
Interesting.
crazy. And January is normally about 133% greater than previous months. So
Hmm.
I'm not exactly sure what to expect for January in
You're
2021.
running out of marriages. There's no one left. Oh, that's funny. Kind of.
Right. I know
Wow.
it's challenging.
Yeah. So how long have you had this business?
Started in 2014.
Okay. So you started this business was it triggered by meeting someone that was divorced, or did you get divorced, or how did you get into the divorce game?
So it was started mainly because I had a bunch of women that I knew that were going through divorce, and I kept hearing a lot of the same things. Rhonda, my attorney isn't calling me back. I'm frustrated. I'm overwhelmed. I
Mm,
don't feel like I know what to ask coming to the table on the financial side. My husband handled the finances. I didn't really handle them. I'm overwhelmed, right? And I'm like, enough's enough. Like, there has to be a better way to do this. And so, right along that same time, I had a friend who, in her late 30s, was widowed
oh,
unexpectedly. Her husband had a blood clot after having an injury. And so, what I did was, I had my divorced women friends and my now widowed friend, and we got together, and I'm like, okay, you guys, tell me what's working. What do you like? What do you not like? Like, and 3 hours and a boatload of Kleenex later, I left there and I'm driving home, and I'm like, I'm going to find a way to help these women. Like, I'm just going to find a way, right? And I didn't know exactly what that was going to look like, but I knew that there was a market for it. Um, so that was really kind of the sense of like, I just was getting irritated with what I felt like was injustice that was happening. Like, to me, returning a phone call and treating people with respect is like, should be, standard business practice, but
oh,
it clearly
totally.
wasn't.
Yeah, it's weird. So I have a call answering service, and it's interesting because we have some clients, they'll for whatever reason have somebody call them that they need to call them back. is something that we can't do for them, whatever it is, right? And we have a few clients that are notorious at just not following up on simple messages that they need to, right? And then of course that person calls back, and sometimes they'll call back multiple times, and we're like, look, man, we can only go so far. We can't hold a gun to our client's head and be like, just call this person back.
Yeah.
We had an accountant that was so bad at that, because she would have people call that got a letter from the IRS. And so they'd call us and say, hey, I got this letter from the IRS to be audited. What should I do next? And that is outside of the scope of what we do, or what we did for this accountant. She retired long ago. Anyway, so we just give the message to the accountant, and of course it's busy time of year, January to April, whatever. And so she wouldn't call them back. And these people are antsy, right? They're anxious because they got this letter from the IRS saying that the world is ending. So they just want support is what it comes down to, right? Even if nothing could be done at that moment. And in defense of the accountant probably knew this, but this person getting the letter from the IRS didn't know that.
Right.
So we could say like, hey, she'll get back to you sometime, but they'd be calling 9 times a day, just like, they still haven't called back.
Right.
And we're stuck in the middle, like, seriously, just call them back, give them a game plan.
Yeah.
Or
acknowledge the message.
And we'll tell them.
Yeah. Acknowledge the message, right?
Totally. But it's so, yeah, we answer phones for a lot of construction companies. Oh my God. I can't even imagine going through a remodel or building a house now or ever. They're so bad at it. So bad.
Yeah. And it's like to your point, right? Like, I mean, sometimes it is emotional. And when you're going through divorce, right, it's emotional. And sometimes people just want to be heard and acknowledged, even if you don't have the answers right at your fingertips at that moment.
Yeah. So, they just, I think they just want to know that someone is helping them.
Yep.
Or that there's a clear next step, whatever that next step is.
Yep.
That we're like, this is the position where we are. This is where your game piece is on the whole game board of life kind of thing.
Yep.
Instead of being like, it's somewhere, we'll take care of it when we feel like it.
Yeah. Or it's not a big deal. Well, okay, but it is a big deal because right now I'm sitting here with this piece of paper, right? Like,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do I pay you for?
So, yeah, I mean, I definitely think that, I think there's a lot of similarities with that. And, what's happened over the last 6 years is, as we've continued to kind of pull back the curtain on some of the stuff that's happening with the divorce process, the greater the need is that we have discovered. Sure. And, we first started working in Wisconsin, and I had done did some research. I'm like, well, there's plenty of divorces here, just in a 5-county region, that could keep us busy. And then I launched a podcast in 2018, which is called Divorce Conversations for Women. And of course, as you know, right, like there's no boundaries with that. So then we were getting calls and people were reaching out like, where were you? Where have you been? I started my divorce process. I'm super overwhelmed. I'm $100,000 into this thing and I don't have a settlement. You're like, wow, this is crazy. So we would get involved and help women out of state. And then this last year in 2020, earlier in 2020, the vision when I started my business back in 2014 was always to have a national footprint, always to be able to reach women, throughout the country. Mm-hmm. And so, we've continued to do that, and organically that has happened. And then 2020 happened, and I decided to bring on another divorce financial consultant so we could actually grow the business. And I'm glad we did, because from the beginning of this year till the end of this year, we've doubled the business.
Nice. Congratulations.
Yeah. In a COVID year. So, it's been great. And, I think it just goes to show that like the women that are reaching out from other states as well, they're like, oh my gosh, where have you been? I mean, nobody has ever said like, oh, this is this is the most ridiculous idea I've ever heard of. They're all like, either they're in the midst of it, wanting some clarity around the finances and wanting help with it. Or if they're on the other side of divorce, they're like, oh my gosh, where were you, 10, 20 years ago?
Oh, interesting.
When I was going through divorce, because there's some misperceptions, I think, around the work that we're doing. And that is, a lot of times people think, well, I have an attorney and the attorney is going to be able to give me all of the guidance and direction that I need. And the attorneys have a job, right? Their job is to provide legal guidance based on what the laws in those particular states say. That's what their job is, right? Mm-hmm. But they're not doing financial projections. They're not doing financial consultation as far as, negotiating necessarily and things like that. And the negotiations are only as good as the questions you ask. So,
Right.
right?
Extremely so. Mm-hmm.
So if you're not asking the right questions and nobody's telling you what questions to ask, then it is what it is. And then you need the emotional. So I always say there's three components to it. There's the financial and the legal and the emotional, and you need all three of those as you're going through divorce. If you have one without the other, it's the three-legged stool that's missing a leg, right? I mean, those are the three main basic areas. So of course you need all of them. And I
I want to
think,
pause you
yeah,
for a second, though.
yeah,
I'm going to challenge that just a tiny bit.
okay.
And maybe this is the man brain in me, but tell me about the emotional part of that. Because I guess from my point of view, having never experienced this, so I'm probably wrong. But I feel like my parents got divorced and that was bitter. This was quite a few years ago. Well, decades ago. And I remember them having a battle over a washing machine that I don't know what they paid attorneys on both sides, but it's a 15-year-old washing machine. My mom was moving into an apartment and she had the choice of like $700 cash or this washing machine. She had no space for the washing machine, but she did not want my dad to have a washing machine. So in order to create a headache for him, she created a huge headache for herself. It's just like, oh my gosh. So from that point of view, emotion cost her a lot of money. And so can you talk a little bit about the emotion thing? Just help me understand that aspect of it. The
Yeah.
positive aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's a great example of like how emotions can get in the way of things, right? And I think, the emotional part of it is an important part. And male and female, right? They deal with emotions differently.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's just a matter of being able to have that professional, right? Mental health professional that can help process what you're going through as you're going through the divorce process and give you some additional tools to deal with the stress related to it. So I think,
Gotcha. Okay.
and I think men are better, or I don't even know if it's better. They just deal with it differently. Like some of my male colleagues over the years that have been going through divorce, you would never know they were going through divorce. Like that's all internal, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas women, on the other hand, want to talk about it and you might see them cry more, at least publicly, whatever, like they just deal with the emotions a little bit differently.
Sure.
And so, I always tell people you can dial in the level of support that you need, but have somebody there that if you need to talk to somebody, and to your point, right? Like, if the average divorce is 52 weeks, which is an entire year.
Yeah. I had no idea. Wow.
Your friends kind of are like, okay, can we move on already? Like, at what point are they going to say,
We're
like,
bored. This is old news. This
we're
is like
sick of
COVID
hearing
just
about
sticking
it?
around.
Yeah, we're sick of hearing about it. Like, can you do something? So I think they're good to a point, but I think having that extra team of people that they're professionals, that's what they do is to help you through this process is really important.
Mm.
And I do think that, we need to process through those emotions. And I can tell the women that we're working with that have a mental health professional they're working with because they do have that extra layer of support through the process.
All right.
Um, so I'll give you an example, James. So one of the things that I have seen over the years is like, let's say, for example, they're going through the divorce process and one of the soon-to-be ex-husband says, hey, here's the offer, here's my proposal to you to settle this thing and move on. And the woman is looking at it and kind of like to your point earlier with the washer situation, she's looking at like, well, that's emotional to me, I know how to use it, and even if I can't, I want to use it, I don't want to let it go. Like there's just emotion around that particular thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's also the financial piece. And so if they don't have the emotional on how to deal with that piece of whatever it is of the property division and the financial thing to say, okay, well, let's analyze that. If you got X amount of dollars here, you could go buy a new washer, like those simple example,
Mm-hmm.
right? Women stay stuck. So then the attorney's like, well, can't you just make a decision? It's a washing machine, but there's more to it. There's more layers to it, right?
All right.
And so I think, yeah, having those three people is really important.
All right. All right. I guess, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't even think about it as adding a professional person to help them with navigate the emotional
Yeah.
distress or overwhelm or whatever.
And
Yeah, I guess I look at it. So I guess I've been told this by my wife that I look at stuff she claims too logically, that I'm just like, it's clear it's a washing machine. To even discuss it with an attorney is not worth it, because the cost of the attorney is going to take away whatever opportunity cost you're getting.
Right. And I think the logic piece for women is there, but we've got to get through the emotional layers first to tap into that logical part of their brain. Whereas if the emotions are clouding it, we can't even have those logical conversations, right? And I remember when I was in the financial industry, and I had developed a curriculum to help women navigate through the divorce process and teach them some basic financial things.
Mm-hmm.
But we dealt with sections, chapters, if you will, 1 through 3, dealt with their attitude about money, their relationship with money, their mindset around money, all of those things before we would ever get to having the conversation around terminology and approach and stuff like that.
All right.
And my male colleagues would say, Rhonda, if your job is to teach them about finances, why are you spending all this time over here on the emotion? And I'm like, because if I don't deal with this stuff first, I can't tap into the logical stuff. If they come in and I'm like, great, we're going to learn about financial terms. We're going to learn about, the rule of 72, whatever. It would be glaze.
That's fair. I can totally appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of laying the groundwork for why.
Yeah.
Which is a huge benefit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
Which, if we think about it from a business perspective too, right? Like, it's the emotion around why we started our business and what we're doing that helps drive and fuel, right? And helps us get creative and think through things versus, if there is no emotion to it, it's hard to tap in, it's just
right. You lose your motivation or your strength.
Yeah.
Or your resiliency, right? You get a challenge of whatever kind, right? Employee leaving, client leaving, whatever. And you're just like, ugh.
Yeah.
But yeah, I that's fair. When you bring your emotion, or I guess the correct emotion, right? Charged, positive emotion, you can get so much more done. So that's fair. Yeah. I can definitely see that.
Yeah.
And you're laying the groundwork, so it's not so boring.
Right. Right. And we have to give them the reason on why they should learn this stuff, right? Because I mean, it's like a lot of women that we work with, their husbands handled a lot of the financial stuff for a variety of different reasons. Sometimes it's because that's what he did professionally, whether he was a financial advisor or an analyst, or he was in HR and handled some of the finances, or he just loved spreadsheets and loved doing it. And it was like, great, you handle that part and I'm going to handle whatever this part is. And it was more of a divide and conquer and a, survival when you have young kids and you've got a family and all this stuff. Great, you handle that, I'll handle this. You like that? Perfect. And so I think a lot of times women end up feeling guilty around the fact that they weren't more involved in the finances when it comes time for them to go through this process.
Yeah, that's fair. My mom with that divorce, she had no idea what was going on, because I believe I was a kid when all this happened, or yeah, whatever. She was just out of touch with where the finances were. So she had no idea when it came to numbers, plus or minus, good or bad, credit card stuff. Had no clue. She was just, I think it was hidden from her. And maybe that was just a generational thing. I don't know. I could see how women would be in a position of like, I don't know how much money we have in the bank or anything.
Right. It's overwhelming. And, I was thinking about something recently that kind of applies to like the business side of things, which is, when we look at kind of history, from 1974 was when women could actually, for the first time, get a credit card or get a business loan that didn't require, a male relative to sign off on it, right?
Yeah, it surprised me when I learned that. I teach classes, or used to teach classes back when you could teach classes, for WIBIC, the Wisconsin's Business Initiative Corporation, which was designed to be a co-signer for business loans for women. And I'm like, what? 1974? Come on. Like, right? I could see like 1918 or something where we weren't as progressive. Like
Mm-hmm.
1974 is not that long ago.
No, it isn't. And so if we look at, so now we've got this generation, right, of women, most of the women that we serve are 45 to 65, okay,
All
kind of
right.
bookends, but of course, a little bit on both sides of that. But, so the women that are in that age range, it was their parents that were still in that mindset.
Mm.
And,
Right.
And so depending on when women got married, right, they've got this 20, 30-year history with their spouse kind of relying on them. So they went from this mindset with their parents, right, of women really didn't have the opportunity to take risks or, have ownership of things
Right.
that their parents by default were teaching them because that's what was allowed. And then they go into a marriage where their husband handled everything and they've missed decades and decades of opportunity to be able to learn how to step into risk. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges I see with women is that they're afraid to take on risk.
Oh,
Now, guys,
that's
on the
fair.
other hand, right? They'll take on risks. They'll invest in a business. They'll take out a loan. I mean, a lot of times, right? And I know we're talking in generalities, but a lot of the women that I talk to, they have a hard time with that. Well, I don't have the money to invest in XYZ, or I'm not able to, and some of it is reality, and some of it is, I'll give you an example. So we have a bank that we work with here locally,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm working on hopefully creating some others in other communities as well, where we have an agreement that they set aside funds specifically to help women that need to pay for the upfront costs of their divorce.
Okay.
Okay. So it's not that they don't have access to them. It's not that they don't have money. It's that they don't have access to the money right now,
Oh, because it's in a
per
joint
se.
account or maybe even an account in the husband's name.
Right. And they don't want to take it out, or they're
Got it.
afraid, or they don't have a
Okay.
credit card in their name, whatever the situation might be. But
Mm-hmm.
there's usually something to work with. They just don't have the funds available, either physically available or emotionally available to take the money out to get started. Because there's an upfront cost to get started with divorce.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
So we developed this program. And you're going to die because as a business owner, I'm like, this is amazing. And it actually came out of, I was teaching at Waukesha County Technical College, so in higher education in the business division, teaching marketing and public speaking and stuff for entrepreneurs.
Oh, nice.
And they came up with a program that would allow the business owners have access to this pool of money where they could then take this $5,000 unsecured loan at 1% interest over 3 years. Like, I'll
Wow.
let that sink in for a sec.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. And that would allow entrepreneurs to maybe invest in a website or invest in, training or invest in something that they might need for their business, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I was teaching, loved that. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is such a no-brainer. Like, oh, this is amazing. And all they had to do is show that they had a business plan. And so there was no, it wasn't collateralized. They just had access to this money at 1% interest over
Wow.
3 years. So of course, as a business owner, I'm like, how do I get access to some of that money?
Right?
And so we worked it out where I took a couple extra classes, so I met the requirements, and then in addition to ones I was teaching, and I was the first one to go through this program.
Cool.
So I presented my business plan to the president of the bank, and he loved it. And then I went back, and they gave me a check for $5,000, and I deposited it into my account and used it for business expenses. And I'm like, well, this is great. So a year later, I went to that same bank and I pitched the idea to them and said, hey, what do you guys think about doing something like that program for women that are going through divorce? And they said, at first they're like, let us think about it. How about a credit card at 0% interest for 18 months? And I'm like, sure. So we started doing that. And then one day they called and said, oh, hey, by the way, we just approved your program and we want to launch this program.
Wow. That's a cool call.
Well, that's cool. I was like, yeah, that works. So they set aside enough for 10 women to have access to $5,000. And they can pay interest only at $17 a month until they either get access to some of the money to pay it off or the divorce is final. And then the goal is that they would pay that loan off in full, whatever the balance is due,
Mm-hmm.
so that then we can use those funds to help somebody else.
All right. Seems
And
like a cool program.
it's awesome. I think we have 6 out of the 10 people so far that have used it. So we have 4 spots open still.
Okay.
But what's been interesting is now this is kind of the tie back on the mindset piece. And that is there's been women that have reached out and I'm like, okay, I think we'd be able to I think we would A, be able to help them and B, I think they're a good candidate for the program. And they get approval. They have to have over a 625 credit score.
Okay.
So
This
as long
should
as they
be
have over 625, right, it's an automatic approval.
automatic. Wow.
As long as they came through us,
Okay.
Women's Financial Wellness Center,
Mm-hmm.
and as long as we're going to be helping them, right? So
Mm-hmm.
it's exclusive for our clients.
Oh, that's even cooler.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So then I guess from the bank's point of view, they know that someone is holding their hand, telling
Absolutely.
them next steps
Yes.
instead of just like, here's some money, good luck.
Yes. Yes. But what's interesting is there have been women who, again, we've eliminated every possible barrier
Mm-hmm.
physically, right? And they say, oh, I don't feel comfortable taking out a loan. And I'm like, I get that. Okay. Nobody wants to take out a loan. Nobody wants to go into debt,
Mm-hmm.
but it's temporary.
Right.
And what other option do you have at this point? Because you have no access to money, even though there's money there, because your spouse has locked you out of everything.
Right. It's a means to an end, I guess. So it seems like one of those things where it's a tool that you may not like using, but it's the best option that you have.
Right.
And in the end, let's say 3, 5 years down the road, it's going to be a memory and a good story. It's not going to be
Right.
anything still looming kind
Right.
of thing.
And at 1% interest, it's basically free money. That's the thing. I'm
Yeah.
like, we got to get our head around, we got to get our head around changing, I think as women in particular, the paradigm around that. Like there's so much, they felt like it was so heavy and negative where it isn't. And I'm like, okay, it's $5,000, right? This is a great stepping stone
Mm-hmm.
for women who want to buy a house or a car or go back to college. Like those price tags on those items are going to be significantly higher than this $5,000,
Right.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And we got to get comfortable with that. And it's not that we do stuff without, you know, doing the research and understanding the program and having a plan, right? But it's okay to take a little bit of a risk.
Oh, absolutely. And this seems
Right.
like a negligible risk.
I mean,
Dare I
right.
say,
That's right.
At 1% interest unsecured.
So it's a matter, I think, too, of like, really, again, I'm not in the business of convincing people that they need to take out a loan. That's not my job. But I do think that there's a really, like, anytime I have an opportunity to share on a platform, like, listen, we got to change our mindset around this stuff. We can't go back to 1974 when women couldn't, like, you now can start to make decisions, women can start to make decisions that men have been making for a long time, that you guys have had more experience, right, to be more comfortable
Mm-hmm.
with those decisions. It's not that women aren't smart enough or able to do that. It's just they don't have necessarily the experience. And one of the formulas that I love to share is, okay, how do we get to that confidence piece? And it's knowledge plus experience that builds the confidence.
Sure.
Because,
Totally.
right, if we have the knowledge without the experience, it's theory. If we have the experience without the knowledge, it's trial and error.
Right.
Let's not do that, right?
Best luck.
Good luck to you, but when we have those two things working together, right, it can be a really powerful way for women to go through and walk through the divorce process, learning along the way. So when they come out of it, they feel really good about, you know what? I think I could get pre-qualified for a home.
Yeah.
Or again, and it's not that they have to be an expert. They just have to be really good at asking questions like, tell me more about that. Or what does that mean? And most of the time, the people that they're working with, if they're working with the right people, are going to be like, they love the opportunity, right? To take a minute and share their knowledge with somebody.
Right. That is cool. And that sounds like that's a fairly recent program. Is that right?
Yeah. So we launched that about 9 months ago or so.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So way recent. Nice. So how do people, I guess, besides super awesome podcasts like this, how do people learn about programs like that or that program specifically?
So it's not something that we publicize on the website or anything like that. It's really, when we do discovery calls, and we think that somebody may be a good fit for it, we'll share that opportunity with them. So if there are people that are listening that are contemplating or going through divorce, we offer a free 30-minute strategy call where we can hop on and find out a little bit more about their situation and maybe ask some burning, answer some burning questions that they have, right?
Sure.
And then if they decide that they want to move forward with some of our services, then we can certainly recommend that as an option.
Nice. That's very cool.
Yeah.
So since you started this in 2014, it sounds like quite a bit has changed in the divorce industry. Is that safe to say?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So are you where you thought you would be when you first started in 2014?
I love that question. I get kind of emotional about that because,
Oh.
I in a good way, like I was sitting in my office in 2014, and the question I asked myself was, what do I want my business to look like 5 years from now?
Great question.
Right? And I thought, well, I can stay the course and stay in the financial industry and have more assets and more revenue and more clients. Or I can go a different direction and really be able to impact even more women across the country, have a niche business that I know there's a need for, and, see where it goes. I have to be honest, I think it's exceeded my expectations.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yes.
That's incredible.
And the reason for that is because, the podcast wasn't on my radar when we first started.
Right. In 2014, they were called radio shows.
Right. And I'd been on TV. So, that was cool. But there wasn't as much opportunity as we have today, right? To be able to reach more people so easily.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
So that's been really good. We have clients all over the country. So that was kind of like a twinkle of a vision, but I didn't know how I was going to do it. You're like, okay, I'm in Milwaukee. How do I reach people in California? How do I reach people in Washington? So we've done that in a variety of different ways. The podcast has certainly helped. We've done specific marketing to specific areas. And about a year and a half ago, I got an additional credential, which is the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst credential.
Wow, that's specific.
I know, it is specific. And it's really, it's very well recognized in the divorce space as being a financial expert. And we can also provide expert witness testimony in the courtroom with that.
Oh, that's super cool. Okay.
So it's a pretty big deal. But then I got involved with other national organizations and started to meet some of the key people in the divorce space as well. And that's helped launch that. And yeah, we are in a really good spot, 6 years into it. So we've exceeded pretty much literally every expectation. Revenue wise, client wise, reach wise, I think as we move into this next year, one of the things that I've been thinking about is the fact that, business and particularly divorce, right? It's not black and white. And so it's continuing to be more of a voice for women. When we first started the business, the feeling was very I don't know, I guess you could say therapeutic, right? Very supportive. We did a lot of groups and workshops and stuff like that. And now I would say it's more advocating. We're in the meetings, we're in the mediations, we're running the numbers, we're, communicating more with the attorneys, and some attorneys love us and some hate us. And the ones that hate us are only because we are actually asking questions that probably they should have been asking,
Right.
But we've been able to, I guess I would say, James, this year, I think we're going to be more bold.
Nice. I love it.
And, kind of shake things up a little bit.
All right, that's fair. That's fair. I wanted to ask you initially when you first started your business, just to help people that are considering starting a business of any kind. You had your clients from the financial world. To market your business, did you initially reach out to some of them that were getting divorced, or how did you launch your business from a marketing perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I really focused a couple things. One is with the strategic partners that I had relationships with from the financial industry. So like attorneys and CPAs and therapists and mortgage
Hmm.
brokers, and created this community for them. Um, but I always look at stuff in like a triangle. And so I think this might be helpful for people. So if we take that triangle and we divide it into thirds, so the bottom layer and then the middle layer and then the top layer. The
Hmm.
bottom layer is like the awareness piece. It's low impact marketing, right? So it's things like, um, ads in a magazine or a business card somewhere, or we could even say social media to some degree, right? Like the goal is just to let people know, like, hey, I'm open for business, right?
Okay.
And so that's an important piece of it. But again, we have to have realistic expectations for that awareness because if we put an ad somewhere and nobody calls us and we're like, well, the ad didn't work. Well, no, the ad maybe did what it was supposed to do, but it doesn't mean automatic conversion. So we can't
Right.
just do those things, right?
Yeah,
So
especially
then,
since what you have going on
yes,
is a bigger ticket, right? It's not like you're selling hot
yes,
dogs or something like that. This is a
right.
huge, someone has to see it, be target market, right? Like going through a divorce or in the process where you would fit,
Yep,
understand what you do. So I imagine there's an
yep,
educational piece in the
yep,
marketing.
yep.
Like there's a lot. I got a window ordering website and we're still trying to navigate
Mm-hmm.
um, marketing because it's such a, like it's a $10,000-$20,000 layout. It's
Right.
not going to be just like, oh yeah, Windows, here's 20 grand, right? Just like that, no problem. So it's
Right.
interesting when you talk about like, hey, we threw out these ads and we didn't necessarily get a client directly from them. I guess the ads didn't work. Like that's, I don't know exactly what you guys charge, but I imagine it's more than just a couple bucks.
Yeah.
So there's,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a bigger decision-making
It
process.
is. It is. And I think so it's going into it like anytime that I'm evaluating those kinds of things, I'm like, okay, what do I want this to do for me? Because if
Mm-hmm.
I just want clients, then don't waste your time, money, or energy.
Right.
If you want to be seen somewhere as part of the overall picture, then I think it can make sense.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so that was one piece of it. Then the middle layer is like mid-range impact. So that's things that focus on education and help position us as the business owners as the expert, right? So that's
Gotcha.
things like podcasts,
Mm-hmm.
blog articles, guest blog articles, um, speaking engagements, written articles, things like that.
All right.
So you can share. And I think that was interesting for me. Like the first time that I did that, and someone said, okay, well, give us your, top three. And I'm like, well, I'm so used to like reiterating other articles that I've written or, read or whatever. I'm like, I get to pick like what the top three are. Like, oh my gosh, right? Like, and I think we forget that. Like, we are the experts in our field and we know more than people because we're experts in our particular area, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I came up with the three things and was like, okay. And so that's kind of where it started was me starting to see myself as the expert to say, listen, I have things to share, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think if I was always waiting for somebody else to feed me the content or feed me those articles, there's value in reading those things, don't get me wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but we can take that information and synthesize that through our lens and then share that information as the expert, right?
Right.
So that's been really fun. TV interviews, radio interviews, all of those media related things. Again, it's positioning us as the expert. And thankfully today, you know, and a little bit when I first started my business, you could take those links and share them. So you're getting, it's not just the one hit wonder of if you don't see me on TV at 9 o'clock on Tuesday, too bad, so sad.
Right. Hit your DVR up.
Yes, exactly. And we did that. But we now have the link, right, that we can share on our website and social media and whatever,
Mm-hmm.
where the amount of hits that we're getting on those particular interviews, for example, are lasting a lot longer and the impact's lasting a lot longer than if it was just, on the TV itself.
Nice. All right.
Um, and those have helped. Again, even being on TV and radio, it's not like all of a sudden the phone starts, ringing off the hook. Like people will see you and they'll they'll acknowledge it and it might spark something. And like one of the times I was on TV, I think we got 5 people that reached out and I think we got 2 clients from it.
That's huge. At least I assume that's huge.
I mean, it's good, right? And then it's again that last thing, the impressions, right? Later where you're like, yeah, I've been on Fox 6 News or I've been on TMJ4 or I've been on WISN or whatever it is, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like those are the things that then you can start to build that branding on your website, on marketing materials that give you that extra layer of credibility.
Mm-hmm.
And then the top layer of our triangle is the influence affiliate kind of feeling where, when you have those people that say, I mean, there was an attorney who joined one of the women's networking groups I'm part of, and there's about 100 people in this group, and they all know what I do, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, every time she would introduce herself to somebody as being a divorce attorney, they're like, you should talk to Rhonda, you should talk to Rhonda, you should talk to Rhonda. And I've got all these like ambassadors, right, for what I'm doing because we have niched it so clearly that people aren't trying to say, I don't know, is it a good fit for her? They're not trying to pre-qualify.
Mm-hmm.
Which I think a lot of times, if people aren't sure what you do, that's what they'll do. Like when I was in the financial industry, everybody wanted to tell me, well, Rhonda, everybody needs financial planning. No doubt. I don't disagree with that.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't have to be the one person that's going to help everybody. I'm going to help the women. That's my lane. Right. Nor could I. That's exactly it, right? Like to think that I could help every single person is ridiculous, nor do I want to. I want to help the women because I'm passionate about helping them. I'm seeing the impact. I love it. Somebody else is going to have to help the guys. Somebody else is going to have to help the couples, right? But there's plenty of opportunity there. And I don't think that they ever really understood exactly what I was doing because they felt like I was leaving business on the table by not going after everybody.
That makes sense. Yeah, that they like, why wouldn't you help these people? They're, whatever.
Right.
I just interviewed a guy, Chad, his last name is, no, it was a different guy. Anyways, past podcast. And he pointed out that the niches are in the riches, or the niches bring the riches.
Yep.
It was interesting talking to him because I was like, what? But the more he was talking about it, I'm like, it makes sense. Because then people know you and they know precisely what you do.
Totally.
And it makes referring you so much easier because they're not sending you everybody.
It's
you're not asking them to think of everybody.
That's right.
You're just connecting the dot with divorce equals Rhonda. Like,
yeah,
as soon as they do that. Yeah, super easy.
Super easy. And, we have a lot of, referrals certainly that happen from friends or family where there's women that are like, or guys really, like, I've got this friend, I don't know what else to do for them. Like, I've not gone divorce. I don't know how to direct them. They need some more guidance and direction. Like, I've got somebody. Like, you want to be so top of mind that it is like a knee-jerk reaction. I've got somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes them feel good, right? Because they're able to give a name of somebody.
Right.
It makes us feel great because we're top of mind for them. Mm-hmm. And it's really, I can't say enough things about being super clear on who you're serving. And just dial that in. I mean, it's worked so great. And here we are 6 years later, continuing to serve women, continuing to grow the business. It's really, really different. And I think the biggest thing too, for me now in this next phase of my business is, in title, right? I've always been the founder and CEO. But, really stepping into that role as the CEO. And delegating, because I have a lot of things delegated, but the thing that I held closest to the vest was my client relationships, right? And being the only person who was, client facing.
Oh, being the only person.
Yes, until early 2020 when I brought on Chastity, and Chastity's based in Madison, but works all over the country as well. And so we're not state specific, right? And so it was a matter of kind of lifting the hood and being able to show her all of our processes and all of our systems and all the things that I've spent so much time building. And now she's able to help clients as well. And we're looking at bringing on a couple, probably 3 to 5 more divorce financial consultants this next year.
Wow.
To help with the volume.
How many would that put you at?
That would put us at somewhere between 5 to 7.
Nice. Super cool.
And
Wow.
I'll still be doing some client work. I love doing it. It fuels me, but my role is going to continue to be more and more of um, being the face of the business, being, doing the interviews, um, building the relationships with our strategic partners across the country,
Mm-hmm.
all of the things that CEOs do, right? And when I first started my business, was doing all of it, right? Like you're trying to build your website and you're trying to set up emails and I mean, the amount of time that I spent early on, I mean, I was not sleeping much, 15, 17 hours a day, easy,
Right.
trying to get my business off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
But I will tell you, I think there's a couple other things that I've learned along the way that I think is important to share. And that is, I went to a sales training in Minnesota a couple years ago, and I remember the trainer saying, it takes so much effort to get the business off the ground.
Mm-hmm.
Don't land the plane.
Oh,
Because if you think about, right, all of the energy and inertia that takes to get the plane up here, right, and we're flying along, once that thing starts to go down, to get that back up again, it's so much easier to figure out a way to keep your plane in the air.
oh, okay. I get the analogy. Got it. Okay.
And that stuck with me, right? Because it's true. Anybody who's starting a business, it is a lot of freaking work, right? It
It
just
is.
is
Mm-hmm.
a lot of work and a lot of things that you're learning along the way and
Mm-hmm.
things that you're like, that didn't work exactly like I thought it was going to, so we're not going to do that again,
Right.
right? Um, I think the other thing is, investing in what you feel like you need for your business, like coaching. If you feel like you need coaching and
Mm-hmm.
you need somebody that's going to stretch your vision and help you, then find that person, right? Or like if you feel like you need to delegate some of the bookkeeping or, the virtual assistant, like the admin stuff, get as much of that stuff off of your plate so you can really focus on the things that you want to be doing and need to be doing to grow your business. And
Definitely.
and I
Yeah.
think that what's interesting about that too is I think people sometimes say, well, I can't afford that. And I'm like, well, how do you know you can't afford it? Have you gotten some quotes on how much it is? Well, no. Well, how about
Right.
we do that first?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are plenty of, people, right? Smaller business owners, especially when you're starting. I started with my little VA team at the time. I remember when I started working with her 5 years ago, and she said, Rhonda, it's going to be $400 a month. And I'm like, $400 a month? Like, no way. And, but I started and I said, okay, I can't do any more than that. And she said, okay, well, let's start there. And as your business continues to grow, we can always reevaluate. And we did. We worked together for almost 3 years. And
Nice.
when I parted ways with her, I mean, we had probably quadrupled the amount of work that she was doing for me,
Wow.
which helped me grow to that next level.
Mm-hmm.
And then she was having some health issues and was really
Oh,
suffering from really bad migraines.
okay.
And it was impacting the amount that she was able to work for me. And I was at this point where I was like going to be going to that next level, that next phase.
Mm-hmm.
So we parted ways and I hired a new VA team that worked with me for almost a year. And they started earlier this year. And now I just parted ways with them at the end of this week because we've doubled in our business over this
Wow.
last
And then
year.
over the course of a year. That's awesome.
And were a team of two people. And I'm like, okay, but my goal for next year is to grow even further. Do I
Mm-hmm.
feel like they have the bandwidth to grow with me? And that was a tough decision too. So I parted ways with them, and now I brought on a team that is 12 deep on the East Coast that has a variety. Like they're going to they have the manpower
Mm-hmm.
and the experience and the expertise to grow with us to this next level. So
Right.
that's been hard, maybe harder for me as a woman to let go of those relationships because I value them, and it never
Right.
seems to get easier when you have to part ways. Like it still sucks.
No, no, I get that because we like with calls on call, we're a call answering service for businesses, and we're doing admin stuff. So I guess you could argue that we helped a lot of businesses grow. And when they either feel for whatever
Yep.
reason that they're better served with their own in-house
Hmm.
or whatever it is, um, that's always tough. It's extremely tough for me, even from like this is one of the few times that I'm like, don't get emotional, James. Because I'm like, we took you from A to B, where without us, you'd be at half of A
I know.
because you're so disorganized. So it's a lot of times it's frustrating when they leave. But on the flip side, it's growth. It's movement. Well, yeah, you hope it's growth. A lot of times it's just movement for the sake of change, I guess. But whatever the reason, there's always more clients. So
yeah,
ain't no thing and move on.
Right. I mean, and it's hard. Like even this week in talking to my VA team as we're trying to get some stuff wrapped up, it's like a bad breakup kind of like we're, like I'm being nice to them and they're being nice to me and professional. But you can tell, like, because they loved working with our team. And
I
think, and I think it came as a little bit of a shock, but it was just one of those things where I had to ask myself, okay, what does my business need?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer was my business needs depth that can grow with us.
Right.
And
yeah, you almost have to pull the emotion out of it and look at it straight up logic, which is tough for something like that. I imagine, especially in the case of that business, you were probably a healthy client for them.
Yeah.
So now that probably wasn't ideal in their world.
Right. So, but there's never an ideal time for that, right? Like
no,
that's the hard part.
Of course.
There's never an ideal time. Like it's painful whether I do it now or I do it 6 months from now.
Correct. Yeah. Rip off the Band-Aid. Yeah. There's
never an ideal time. So sometimes you just have to make those moves, part ways, close that door, and then move on. And and I've gotten better at that over the years. The more that I do it, a little bit easier it gets, where I feel less emotional with some of those decisions, but it's taken time.
Yeah. I totally understand that. Nothing thickens the skin like starting a business.
That's right. Well, and I think one of the books that I'll often recommend to people is a book by Dr. Henry Cloud called Necessary Endings. Oh. And it's a book that talks about, we only have so many, he uses the example of a rose bush, right? And we only have so much nutrients that plant can have, right? Mm-hmm. Sun, water, soil, whatever. Mm-hmm. And we want to make sure that by pruning the rose bush, we're really focusing those nutrients on the ones that are most likely to be able to live and get the biggest and beautifulest and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. It's the same thing with our businesses, right? Like we have to look at, okay, what do we need to prune off so that we can really focus our energy and our attention on the things that are growing and working well and continue to help us thrive. Sure. And I think it's easier to focus sometimes on the wilted flower than the one that's growing and say, we got to divert resources from here to here.
That's fair. That's totally fair. It's an interesting analogy. I like that.
So that's a great book.
Rhonda, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, absolutely. The best way to reach us is via the website, which is wfwcdivorce.com.
All right. That stands for Women's Financial Wellness Center. Divorce.com.
You got it. Yep.
Awesome.
And all of our contact information is on there, as well as if anybody's listening that would like to book a strategy call, there's a tab right on there that you can book those calls. And we're doing all of those. I do all of those initial calls. So anybody that calls will talk to us. Talk to me. So
very cool. They get the Rhonda.
That's right.
The Rhonda. The divorce equals Rhonda. That's awesome. This has been Authentic Business Adventures, the business program that brings you the struggles, stories, and triumphant successes of business owners across the land. I think we're almost on episode 150, so I'm excited for this.
Nice.
Rhonda, I know that you've been doing podcasts for a couple of years now, right?
Yes.
So do you have a separate link for your podcast?
The podcast actually can be found on the website
Awesome.
Or iTunes, iHeartRadio, all that kind of stuff.
The usual suspects as far as
yes.
it goes for a podcast.
Yes.
Awesome. My name is James Kateman, and Authentic Business Adventures is brought to you by Calls on Call, offering call answering and receptionist services for service businesses across the country on the web at callsoncall.com, as well as Draw In Customers Business Coaching, offering coaching services for entrepreneurs looking for growth on the web at drawInCustomers.com. And of course, the Bold Business Book, a book for the entrepreneur and all of us, available wherever fine books are sold. We'd like to thank you, our wonderful listeners, as well as our guest, Rhonda Noordyk. Rhonda, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, James.
Can you tell us your website one more time?
Yes, wfwcdivorce.com.
Awesome. Past episodes can be found morning, noon, and night at the podcast link found at drawInCustomers.com. Thank you for listening. We will see you next week. I want you to stay awesome. And if you do nothing else, enjoy your business.